Welcome to Ideas on Trial. I'm your host, Leopold Ajami, and I have with me my co-host, Ricardo Pinto. Every time I listen to our music, to the podcast music, I feel a lot like Alice in Wonderland. But I don't feel like I'm falling, rather like I'm in a quest for clues. So a lot like Hercule Poirot, right? And the reason I feel that is because I don't know, I feel there's something really magical about it. I love the music and I have someone to thank for that. So, in today's episode, we have a very special guest and we are putting music on trial. And our guest is the man behind our podcast music, Edmond Redd. Ed is a composer for video games, films, TV, and other media. He also teaches audio production and audio and music compositions for video games. And you can find his work on edmondred.com. Hello, Ed.
Hi, Leopold. Hi, Ricardo. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So today we have a couple of undisputed ideas we want to put on trial. And some of the question we're thinking of is, want to understand from you what's the power of music and how does it affect our lives and how does it affect our character? So we have a lot of questions. But the first question I want to start with is, do you love the podcast music as much as we do? Our podcast music.
Well, definitely, yes, of course. And every music that I write usually there's a part of me in it. So that's very important. So yeah, the podcast music is a nice, funny story, because when you approached me for that one, if you want me to talk about the process, that
Please.
would be something. So we were talking about how to make things happen, and then we went on trial. So just the idea, and we had this sound of
the hammer, right?
The hammer, yeah. It has a
name.
Word. Yeah. I'm drawing a blank here, but that was the sound, and it was like when you say "or rise," there's this hit, like it goes like tan tan tan. I was like, okay, that's a signature sound that we could use for the trial itself. So the idea is on trial, so we could use that, and that was actually the start of how the music came to life. So it always starts somewhere with an idea, with something that we want to express, and I build the idea around it.
Okay, Eddie, you're speaking Chinese. And I'll tell you why.
Okay, I wish I could.
When you tell me ideas, I think about words, I think about products, I think about
concepts.
Yeah,
but
anything.
Music? Like, how do you come up with an idea for a music? How does it look like? It's so strange. It's so abstract.
It goes against conventional knowledge about music, because we're told everywhere that music is all about feelings, not ideas, not concepts. So how do you think about that?
Well, that's an interesting approach, that music is feelings. Well, I suppose if you take the other side of the coin, so when you're the one creating the music, not the one receiving the music, well, you have to express an idea, right? And then you as a listener, you'd listen to it, and then it will trigger some feelings. Now, is it the feelings that I wanted to express or not? That's a different story. But as a composer, it's my role to put ideas, whether concepts, whether colors, whether taste, whether feelings, anything, any idea, into music. I mean, if you listen to, I won't start naming composers and stuff, but when you go for let's say, well, I don't know if it's appropriate right now to talk about that, but if you talk about Russian...
of course it's appropriate. Of course.
But I mean, the communist anthem and stuff like that, well, those are political music, it carries an idea. And now the feeling is different. The answer, the response of the listener is probably something different, but the idea behind that music is to carry a message. So music and lyrics, and as any way of expression, like words, they are here to express an idea. And if you can articulate clearly what you have in mind with words, well, you could do it with music as well.
Yeah. Before I step back and ask you a question there, I just want to make a disclaimer that we are against the idea of banning Russian literature or Russian music or any kind of that because of what's happening. Yeah, like that's something ridiculous we find. So having said that, I mean, again, I want to push back this idea because
just to clarify one thing, just about Russian thing. Yeah, I'm probably against that as well, but I'm against also the war that is happening. So just to be clear on that.
Same here.
So
Okay, so let me clarify my question. When I think of ideas on trial, right? Like, to me, in my mind, the concept is, okay, we are in court and we're judging. So in court, you judge people, you punish or reward people. There's the concept of justice. But we're turning that, we're judging ideas. Okay, so I can imagine it, that there's all these concepts around it, the judge, the defender, all rise. Let's put ideas on trial, right? So the conceptual framework there is kind of easy, right? Like it's not easy, but you can conceive it. But how do you do that with music? Like, do you think about the surrounding? Do you think about what's the sound? Do you imagine what would be the sound of the court? Or like, how do you do that?
Yeah, definitely. There are a few things to take in consideration. Is basically the end goal of the music you're writing. So if you're writing music just for the sake of writing music, that's one thing. If you're writing music to support a movie or a picture or a game, that's another thing, because you have like visual indication on screen of what's happening, or maybe the underlining thing that are happening that might not show on screen. So that's a second part. And the third part is like when you do music, and that's called sonic branding. So when you try to find the sound of a brand. So there are different approaches, of course, and each has its own probably process or a way of approaching things. So yeah, a few people would find it easier maybe to have an image and then compose to picture, and hence the music composers for films and TV and media. And you have who would say or would talk about the muse and wait for inspiration and try to write something, whatever it comes. And then you have the branding, where it becomes a bit more complex, because it's like you have to go for an abstraction of an idea. So if you're doing an airplane, maybe commercial or branding for an airplane brand, you'd have to think about, okay, what's the sound of the cabin? What's the sound of the airport? What's the sound? I mean, even if you listen to one of probably the most expressive branding, sonic branding, is well, there's a lot of example in that, but you could take, for example, let's say the Mac. When you turn on a Mac computer, there's this chime. Well, it's in C major. It's like a positive chord, and it welcomes you into the Mac. That's as simple as that. Whereby you can go for, let's say, a McDonald's, where you have "I'm loving it," the jingle. So that's the happy place. That's where you want to spend some time. So it's like, it depends really on the product. So there's a lot of abstraction when it comes to sonic branding as well.
So you're talking about the end result. And I know it's so hard. So when we're talking about music, the range is so large, right?
Yep.
But I want to focus the discussion on what you're doing now, which is more into trailer music and video games, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's music without lyrics. So we're not talking about songs, even though we might touch a little bit on it. And I know, like, I'm a fan of soundtrack as well. And I remember we talked about that a lot before. So I guess my question is, when you talk about the end result, is the end result an injection of a specific kind of emotion? Like, that's how you think about it? and that emotion is beyond like happy or sad. And I'll give you an example, right? Like one of the reasons why I love soundtracks, whether I'm watching the movie or not, is because the composer makes me imagine the progression of events, right? And I go through this roller coaster of emotions. So it's not just one emotion.
It's not.
And it's so hard. Like, how do you think about that? How do you think about emotions when you're composing?
Again, so just to make the clarification between the trailer music and the soundtrack, because these are two different worlds, I'd say. But to answer, yeah, whenever we're writing music or whenever I'm writing music, I'm looking into telling a story. So yes, there's definitely, it's not just emotions. So it's not happy or sad, and it's not major and minor chords only. So that's beyond those two small things. It's a bit more complex than that. I want you as a listener to engage with the music and feel that I'm taking you from point A to point F, going through B, C, D, E, for example. So for trailer music, it's simpler because we're not scoring to picture. So we have a set structure for that. I need to take you from a generic feeling of like establishing shots, just setting a certain mood that I'm looking at. So for example, I'll give you a more detailed example. If we're talking about a Marvel movie, so I want to introduce you first to the universe where it's happening, whether it's on Earth or whether it's on a certain planet, far distant planet in the universe. So in order to do that, so I'll go and just establish that mood. If it's something that is out of this world, probably I would be looking into instruments that doesn't necessarily exist, or some sounds that are not something that you'd hear on Earth. So I'm just giving you the idea of the location. Where is this happening? And what's the mood surrounding that? Is it scary? Is it something that is dark? Is it something that is light? So for example, for light, I would use a flute or a piano. So those are instruments that we have them in what we would call the universal conscience. So we know when we hear a flute, it's somehow feminine, light, not a recorder, flûte à bec, like the flute, the one that goes. Yeah. So we have this idea. If we want something
like the archetypes, it's like there's some kind of instruments. All right.
Exactly. So when you go into like low brass instruments, there's something that is dark and happening and foreboding. So you need to match the instruments, like the words, to what you're saying, right? And then that's in a trailer situation. So the first act is like we're establishing the mood, the ambience, the atmosphere where we're at. And usually, because trailer music is, well, if you want to put it in a clearer word, is marketing music. So it has a goal. This music has a goal, as well as the trailer music. The trailer itself has a goal, is to get people to go and watch the movie. So you need to make it attractive. So trailer music comes and support that idea of being commercially viable, and it's commercial music. It's not looking for like some artistry or some like out of this world ideas in performances, right? We need to get the idea there. The second, tell me.
No, make your second point, because I have a major point to make about the stories thing.
Okay.
You can continue, please.
Okay, fine. The second part is where we need to build a certain tension to what's happening. So we're looking into, okay, on screen, we're introducing the characters, we're introducing the plot, we're introducing the good, the bad. So there is a format to it. So here the music should be tensed. And usually to use this, to have this tense feeling, we go for repetition. So that's something that we could use in music. So repetitive sounds, something that is consistently there. So it could be a bass line, it could be an ostinato string, which is a pattern that is repeated over and over and over and over. So when you do
there's a whole
that,
science behind this.
definitely, and that's only the music. You still have the sound design that comes with that to support everything that you're doing. But basically, use ostinatos at this moment is basically what you want to do most. So that's your second act, and then you have the third act, which on screen is basically what is happening all over the place. So that you have the fast cuts, you have like the cuts that last at just a second or two max. So there's a lot of action happening, and you have to go into the full like meat and fat of the music. So you put all your instruments, all your percussion, everything is happening at this moment, but you have to have a cliffhanger at the end of it. So you need to take it, rise it, go to a climax. And when you reach the climax, just cut it. And you leave your audience going like, what happened? So it's
like the elements of a story. And I would say it's a lot like writing a series story than writing just one novel, specifically with the cliffhanger. Now you're leaving them waiting for the second episode.
Exactly.
I love that.
And maybe what's tricky about it is that sometimes it shouldn't feel easy for the audience, not at every moment, because I really like the analogies of stories. And more than an analogy, I think it's a truth, because you're establishing some clues that the audience, the listener, has to discover, has to pay attention to in order to reach that climax. So, for example, I was telling Leopold that one of my favorite composers is perhaps the father of all soundtrack music, Richard Wagner. And yeah, and it took me time to like Wagner. I didn't fall in love with him from my first listening, neither from the second. It took me so much time paying attention to his music, trying to memorize something because there isn't much melody there, and reading the libretto. And there is a value once you can put everything together. And that is true also of soundtrack music, of every kind of orchestral big music.
Right.
But yes, you want to make a point?
No. I'm saying, okay. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. But I feel that that's not the case anymore, especially with popular music, because it's composed in such a way that the audience has to get it quickly in 5 seconds, because that's how much they retain. So do you think that's a truthful appreciation of modern pop music, contemporary pop music? And what do you think is that?
That's a bit more complex. It's true that Wagner was probably and is the father of soundtrack music with his operas and his arrangements and stuff like that. And I suppose that many of the composers that came afterward, like Korngold and all those composers in the 1920s and 30s, 40s, 50s, were largely inspired by Wagner, by the work of Wagner. And today's John Williams, for example, is largely inspired by Korngold. So there's this continuation of things that we learned back in the 1890s or something. So that was the time where Wagner was doing his operas and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that we learn. Now, when we go into pop music, it's like, well, to me, it's like the difference between writing a novel and a blog. That's
a very good analogy.
If you go like, yeah, the blog is, yeah, we've learned a lot, we've read a lot, we've researched a lot, but we need to put it in a format that probably cater for today's need. But that doesn't mean that you have to write the blog just to write anything. So you could have a well-written blog, but adapted to a format that is, let's say, a bit more contemporary, put it this way. But it doesn't mean that you have to write rubbish in your blog spots, right? Blog post. So and with the advanced, well, there's something, and I understand this. I wouldn't say that classical music is on a higher level than pop music, or it's like for the elite. It's not. Classical music is for some whoever wants to enjoy music. So I don't like this thing where we put classical music on a pedestal and say, yeah, the other music is bullshit, right? So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to say something about that because, I mean, on the one hand, it requires more work just from the length of it, right? And you are composing for an orchestra. But on the other, that doesn't mean, I mean, classical music was the popular music in the 19th century, right?
Exactly.
And people went to the opera houses and to the symphonies.
But yeah, just to give you an example, that Mozart, back in his time, the music he was writing was popular music. If you take the Enchanted Flute, for example, well, that was like popular music. And people used to go to the opera, and there were no seatings in the opera. They were just hanging out in the operas. It wasn't like you have to dress up to go to an opera house and sit
and they were rooting.
exactly. So that shows you that things evolve. And yeah, it's true that we don't write with pen and paper, although some of composers still do that. But we have tools today that with just a mouse click, you can do music. Well, is that bad per se? Well, no, that's technology. It's empowering people to express themselves. Now, I'm not saying that everybody will have great music, but it's like not everyone is a good writer. I'm not. Although I studied copywriting and I was in communication, but I don't consider myself as a good writer. Now, I do express my ideas in a clear way somehow, but that doesn't make me a good writer, as much as maybe you play an instrument or Leopold plays an instrument, but that doesn't make you a musician per se.
Yeah. Surely. You know, this is a big debate between, classical and popular and the whole historical thing behind it.
Yeah.
But I feel that, let me put it this way, some music is written for your ears and others for your skin.
But can you elaborate on that?
Of course. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite composer of all time, as you probably know, is Ennio Morricone, right? And when I listen to Ennio, I don't listen to him. I feel him in my skin. I was just telling Ricardo, I have a very specific spot where I feel his music, and it's the upper part of my spine. And every time I listen to him, this is where he hits me, right? I guess the point is, it's not a historical issue, the value of classical music versus popular. It's about the emotions and the elevation that it gives you. So there's an emotional part, but there's a spiritual part that classical music gives you, right? And I think that's the value of it. When I listen to Mozart or Ennio or any one of these giants, it's not just that I feel it. I'm invited to a world where I can experience something very specific, something that I want to experience. You see that? It's like their music is moving my soul to a place I can't go alone. That's how I feel. Like I need them. So I don't know if you experience that or if you feel that when you're writing your music.
Well, that's extremely extremely personal, but yeah, when I get goosebumps, I know that I'm done with the music.
I was asking Ricardo about that. Like, how do you judge that you're done with that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
How can you
I
tell?
get to this. I'm like, that's it. It doesn't need anything else. It's well, that's personal. I probably never. Well, just my wife knows that because she knows how down I can go when I write music, and I usually storm out of the studio. And I'm like, I can't write. I'm a shit composer. I doesn't work. And then she tells me, go back and figure it out. And then I have to go back to my studio, close the door, and try to find it out. And 2 hours, 3 hours later, I'm like, yeah, got it. So that's how it works for me. But to go back to your point, I really appreciate the fact that you enjoy Ennio this much, but I mean, not everyone would enjoy Ennio the way you enjoy it. So I can't speak either of you or Ennio. But the thing is, and to keep in mind, is when you listen to music, it puts you somewhere, no matter what music you listen to. I don't know what you heard in the summer of '96, for example, as music on the radio. And then now if you listen to it, you're like, oh, this reminds me of. Yes. It puts you directly into the first time you listen to it, or with whom you listen to that music, or in which occasion you were, or in which psychological mind you were into that period. For me, for example, there's one song in Opeth. It's a heavy metal band, Opeth, and there's another one, Porcupine Tree. When I listen to them, I cry without even noticing. It's not because the music is amazing. It's not.
There's an association with something.
But there is an association to a certain period of life, of my life, where I was struggling with that. And that music was here as a support. I was listening to that on repeat. And then when I listened back to it, it automatically threw me in that period of time.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question here.
Yep.
Do you think, because I'm thinking now about the role of music in the culture, yep, and in character development, do you think you can reverse engineer the process of association? So for example, if I'm born listening to, you brought Britney Spears last time, Ricardo, so I'm gonna bring Britney Spears. If I'm listening to Britney Spears and that's all what I listen to, is there, how can you educate me on different genre or classical music? Because I still believe there's a real value from classical music. And I'm not saying that you have to listen to it every day, but there's something there that I'm trying to articulate. There's something important spiritually for you. I can't imagine life without such music. And I know that maybe not all people feel this way, but how can you teach someone, I guess that's my question, to appreciate such music, whether glorious soundtracks or classical music? Or
that's a tough one, to be honest.
I know, and I'm grappling with that as well. So let's grapple together.
yeah. What I'm looking at, actually, okay, I'll try to divide this into several parts just to make sense of what's happening. So, well, if you didn't get the educational part when you were young, can you reverse it when you're adult? That's one part.
Yeah.
And the other part is, if you don't like this kind of music, can I make you like it?
No, it's not about that. If you don't appreciate, for example, classical music, is there a way to teach you? Sorry?
Yeah, but why don't you appreciate it? Is it because you don't like it?
No, because of association. Let's say I've never listened to it in my childhood, so I don't have the association that you're talking about. Therefore, I don't connect with it.
Right.
That's my question.
Let's put that as an example with food.
Yeah.
If I tell you that's a Japanese fish, you never ate fish in your life, that's a Japanese fish, would you taste it? Well, some people will. Some people won't as a starter. Some people, the ones who tasted it, some would like it, some won't. So, there's a lot of variables in that. So we can't really trace it back to something that is a definite answer for that.
I just want to point out that that is a really helpful analogy, because I guess the difference that Leopold was trying to establish with some music is for the hearing, other for the skin, is that some music aims at capturing a moment, a specific feeling, for example, or a situation, a memory you have. Another type of music tries to recreate an experience. And both are valid and both are necessary. And if you think about food, so I don't remember what you mentioned, Japanese fish. Imagine I haven't tasted it, but if I cook it in a rush and I tell you, oh, come on, taste this, I will probably won't have a pleasant experience, right? But if I go to the restaurant and I go through the whole process and the etiquette, and I have a memorable experience around that, I have taken the time to, I'm not habituated to it yet. It's not part of my character, of who I am. But now I have taken the time, and I know that it's probably worth it. And that's, I think, the first question that anyone can ask themselves. Should I listen to new music?
Yeah.
Why?
That makes sense, and that's totally true. You have to take time to listen to new music and to understand what's happening with you. It's not something that will hit you. Well, it might hit you if you're watching a movie and then you listen to a music and you hear that music and you're like, oh, I like that, and you go and look it up. Usually, most of the time, film music is there to support. Now, if I tell you to hum one of the Marvel's theme or music that is happening in their movies, you probably won't be able to. If I tell you what's the Hulk theme or whatever, but if I tell you what's the Star Wars theme, well, you'll go and sing it out loud, right? So that's a different thing as well. As you said, there is some music that is here to support. There are other music that are here to recreate a feeling. And we as humans, most of the time, are attracted by melody. So if you can hum it, if you can sing it, it's like this is why songs are more popular than music, because you can put words and then the melody would fall under those words and you can hum it.
Yeah, and there is something cognitive about that.
Exactly.
It's the concrete identity you can retain.
Exactly.
For example, like a passage from a poem or a specific scene from a novel you read.
Exactly. So that makes it easier for you to memorize songs rather than music. So in order to understand music, you'll have to give it some time. You have to give the experience. Then now, from a composer perspective, when I listen to music, I don't just listen to music. To start with, I barely have time during the day to listen to music because I'm working, writing music. So I can't put music while I'm working. It doesn't work. But whenever I'm listening to music, it's always analyzing the music. Always. So
how do you do that?
That's hard.
Can you take us
through? Sure. I'll give you a simple example, and that's there are two ways actually to do it. It's either you listen to the music and you intently listen to one instrument and try to follow that instrument in the music. So let's say a bass part in a lo-fi chill music. So listen to the bass, and then try to hear what's that doing over time. So it might be just one note at the beginning, and then when it goes into the chorus, it goes into like a faster pace or whatever. So that's one way you can do it with no tools, with nothing. Just sit back and have a good pair of headphones and listen to, pick one instrument and try to follow it all the way. So that would give you an idea to start with. Try to find like patterns. Oh, yeah, okay. So that was, for example, the double bass was doing that. Now it's the bassoon that is doing that. So what is the relation between that instrument and that instrument? Is there any other instrument that are answering this question? So when you start understanding the story behind the what's happening in the music, you have a better sense of what the composer wanted to say. So that's one. The other one, and this is my personal favorite, is to go and look for scores. So printed sheet of music, and then you play the music, and then you read the score. So like some people, and I know Leopold would agree with that, some people would enjoy books and some people would enjoy audiobooks. I do enjoy an audiobook while having the actual book in front of me. So it's like I'm hearing and I'm reading and I'm assimilating the book twice as much as I would do differently. Now, yeah, there's an inherent problem with audiobooks is sometimes that they're monotonous or they're not saying the right, or it limits the imagination of what I would have expected that the sound would be or something. Yeah, but at least I can have an hearing, an audible experience as long as a visual one.
You clarified something for me now. Yeah, and I don't want to go back. I mean, I will go back to the analogy of the food because I wasn't convinced while you were talking.
Okay.
But now you brought a couple of points, and I think it's important to talk about it. So here's what I'm thinking. So I'm connecting the point of the food and the differentiation of pop music and classical. So there's a difference between physical needs and spiritual needs. The food is a physical need. And I would put that in the category of pop music. So pop music, you listen to it, I like it, I don't like it, the same way you would experience food, right? Like I've never tried Japanese. I might not like it, right? But it seems to me, and I don't know, it's top of mind, but it seems to me that there are some musics, some grand composition that are not equivalent to physical needs. They are written, as I said in the beginning, for your skin, they're written as a spiritual need. They are composed to elevate your spirit or to put you in a certain spiritual state. So I don't find the analogy helpful for all kinds of music. It works, I think, for pop music, but I'm still stubborn on the point that some music is written for your awareness, for your conscious and subconscious mind. It's written to put you in a certain state. I don't know if that's helpful, but I'm raising this up because I've always loved music and I would listen to hard rock and classical music at the same time. So I love almost all genre. But I think what helped me appreciate music is philosophy. Because when I started studying philosophy, I started making some links between how we view the world and how we view ourselves in the world and what the composer is trying to do. Like if I go to your website, and I was doing this today, and I listened to the Fables.
Fable, yeah.
And it's beautiful, and it took me to a certain world, and I want to invite our audience to go there and to listen to any of these tracks. It's not a music that you can put in a, I don't know, restaurant, right? But it's a music and it's not a music for concentration. To me, I go to your website before I start working. I get my injection, right? And I pump myself up, and then I start working. Does it make sense?
It does, and there's definitely, I'm not saying that all music is created equal. That's not what I said, but I'm saying that, yeah, there are music, for me, for example, the Mozart Requiem is something that is, like, I would say completely out of this world. Like, if you haven't heard that, please do so. I urge you. And that's the least you can do for humanity, is to go and listen and listen to the Mozart Requiem. I mean, it's beyond imaginable what that kind of music is. I don't know if he was I don't know what was the and you look at the Requiem and you look at the Enchanted Flute and you're like, wait, how come?
And
It's
that's
like,
why, Eddie,
yeah.
you have philosophers, for example, like Nietzsche, would say without music, life would be a mistake. Or
Yeah.
just now, Ricardo read something from Victor Hugo, if you can bring it up. Like, it's not random, right? Like, without such music, I think life would be a mistake. Like, I don't want to live
definitely
in a world without such music.
Yeah.
You want to read that, Ricardo? And
Sure.
I want to ask you a personal question after that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But I want to challenge you first.
Yeah.
So the quote by Hugo is, quote, "Music expresses that which cannot be said and on which it is impossible to be silent," unquote. Which is beautiful. So I'm not bought into the distinction between the physical and the spiritual, because I think both are physical and both are spiritual.
Yeah, they are both, but I think there's a primary focus.
To certain levels.
I would put it as one is metaphysical.
Yeah.
Mozart's
The classical,
Requiem
yeah.
is metaphysical, right?
Yeah.
You could argue that Ennio's music has metaphysical themes also.
Absolutely.
And other type of music is more situational. It captures some moments. For example, in my case, my metaphysical music is Wagner, Tristan and Isolde. But I also love Motown music, for example. And Motown music is playful, it's joyful. And I have moments for those, but it depends on what I want, what kind of world I want to access at the precise moment.
Yeah, and I totally agree. That's why I didn't feel that the analogy is accurate for me to distinguish it in my mind. Definitely, I'm not saying that music is for your.
I don't want to
body.
go into the metaphorical and stuff like that, but just to keep in mind that there's the receiver end and there's the maker end.
Yeah.
So it depends. So again, the analogy wasn't perfect as such, but you need to understand there's the way I perceive music versus the way I listen to music as a listener with no knowledge of music whatsoever. So in my mind, I can analyze what's happening. For example, even if I'm listening to a Sia song, a Billie Eilish song, or a Mozart song, I can go and say, okay, what did this, for example, if you take, I think it was Hans Zimmer in Inception, maybe, or something. He took Edith Piaf, Non, Rien de Rien, the music. He slowed it down, took an octave, took it to an octave below, reverse it, and make that wow sound. So that, for example, is genius, right? But Mozart back then wouldn't have those tools in order to create such things. So I feel that, and I always question myself, what would Mozart do, or what Mozart have done if he had what we have today? Would that, for example, make him less a genius than what he is, or more of a genius?
And if he had AI, maybe.
Exactly. So all those questions, you can't compare. Like, okay, fine, you don't like, going back to that analogy, and I hope it's the last time, but was the fish made by an amazing chef less remarkable because you didn't like it?
Of course not, yeah.
So always keep that in mind and question yourself that, yeah, okay, now Mozart genius, that's a different story. If we want, we could talk about that. But the idea is, keep in mind, we are living in a world where we have access to almost everything at a fingertip that used to take us ages to get back then. And I'm talking like 20 years ago. Yeah. We couldn't have access to a studio, a musical studio, without paying thousands and thousands of dollars. And now a couple of hundreds, and you get a fully functional studio that is beyond what you could have had 10 years ago.
Yeah. I remember once you shared with me a story that really touched me, and I want you to share it with our audience if you're willing. And it's the story of. So I remember that one time you shared with me that you wrote to Gabriel Yared, and you were young, right? So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that and what you learned? And the reason why I'm asking this is because I know there are some people who are listening to us who are into music and all that. And I have to say that I've witnessed how much consistent you are, at least when you were in Dubai. Now you're in Canada, but I witnessed how consistent you were in developing your skills and in studying and in trying and in failing and in succeeding. And it's, for me, beyond music, that's an exemplar of productivity and purposefulness. So I celebrate that, but I want you to tell us about Gabriel Yared. What happened?
Okay, so just a heads up, I love Gabriel Yared. I have nothing against the guy, and he's amazing. He's an amazing composer.
Who is he?
Okay,
For the audience,
he's a French composer from Lebanese origins. He's behind few scores, notable scores, one of which is The English Patient. He won an Oscar for that, and he's currently...
The Notebook? Isn't he behind The Notebook?
I don't remember all of his scores, but he started back then in the 80s with French New Wave cinema. I forgot the director's name. He's a self-taught composer. So in a nutshell...
City of Angels.
City of Angels, that's right. That's one of the scores, for example, that made me wanted to get in touch with such a person. So I researched about the guy, and I knew, well, you could...
That was like, what, 20 years ago, right? If not more.
Whoa. Do I have to mention that?
No,
yeah, probably.
You sounded older. That was like, what, 50 years ago?
Probably around that time. Yeah, it was, well, let's say it was around 2004, 2006, probably around that time. It was like a turbulent time back in Beirut, Lebanon. There was like this war, and I don't know what was happening, but that it was a dark period of time. So I researched, and back then you have to put in perspective that YouTube was created in 2007, 8 maybe. So back in 2004, there were no YouTubes, right? Google was maybe just starting or something. So it wasn't that accessible and easy to find. Yeah. So I could actually find his physical address in Paris, France. So I was looking into some yellow pages back then and stuff like that. So I could find his physical address. So I was like, okay, instead of writing an email, I'm going to write like a handwritten letter. And I did that, and I sent it. And I was just hoping that he would read it, I attached also with this letter a small CD. That was the trend back then. You could have your regular like circular CD, but you could have also a rectangular one. Yeah, kind of. So I sent that with my handwritten letter, and I was hoping that someone would listen to.
And what was the context of the letter? Just grosso modo, like you asked his opinion or something.
Yeah, because I was asking. I wanted to do music for film from so long. I wanted to compose music. I just wanted to be in music for films, and I would do anything for that. So yeah, you're right. I was probably around my mid-20s, because when I got the answer, because I got an answer back, but it was an email, and I printed that email and I read it. And I remember I was in Cyprus at that time, because there was like a war happening in Lebanon. So I read it, and I was like, that's utter bullshit. And that was back then, that I need to really mention that. So the reason why...
So you weren't happy? with what he
at
wrote to you.
all. And I was like completely deceived. And I was like, who is he? Who is he to tell me that I'm late for that I'm in my mid 20s and that there's nothing left for me to do? And then it's like it pushed me to, I don't know if it was consciously or unconsciously, but it pushed me to prove him wrong somehow. It was like a challenge I put to myself that, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong. Fast forward to maybe a couple of years when I moved to Canada. So I was just moving my stuff from Dubai to Canada. And I got to see his email because it was in my papers.
I
was
love
like,
that.
Let me read that again and see where I'm at. I completely
Mr.
forgot.
Yared.
Yeah, exactly. And I had completely forgotten about that email and that challenge that I've put to myself. And when I read it, I was like, seriously, this is what I got from it. The guy was extremely supportive. He was telling me that, listen, it's a very tough thing. It's a very tough journey you have to go through. At your mid 20s, it's going to be tougher because you haven't started at that time, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. So, and the follow-up that he hadn't had the chance to listen to my music because the CD wasn't working or he didn't have a CD player or something. But anyways, if I wanted to carry on with music, know that it's a very extremely hard journey. And I was like, how did I come up with that challenge? So yeah, just to tell you, it's like because I wanted to hear that differently, because I wanted to interpret things differently, which probably ties again back to what we're talking. It's about how you perceive things and how you want to perceive things. So if you're clear on your ideas and if you're clear on what you hear, then it's up to you to understand the music or not.
This is a beautiful story. And I remember that you called me because I know the story. And you called me when you discovered the letter and you're like, oh my God, all these years I was thinking about Gabriel Yared in a wrong way. He didn't mean it this way. And sometimes, as you said, we hear what we want to hear and we see what we want to see because it's hard to be objective and to understand really what the person is trying to say. I love that story. Okay, we're almost at the top of the hour, Eddie. But what I want to ask you at the end is, from your experience, and I know that you were teaching in Canada as well, students. So from all of your experience, how do you think music and music education affect our character? Do you think that it has a role? And I wanna say something here because I was having a discussion with Ricardo and I told him that we have an expression in Lebanon that I don't know if I can articulate it properly, but it's like music gets you cultured. Like it cultures you, right? It's beyond just education, it makes you cultured. So what do you say about that?
Well, definitely. I mean, the influences of music is certainly something that is beyond what, at least for me now, is beyond what I can imagine. It's pushing me to boundaries that I'm interested in to know more, especially like neuroscience and music. It's a field that is extremely interesting. I was going with Oliver Sacks' book, and I was extremely interested in music and the treatment of elderly people, especially with like degenerative diseases like Alzheimer and I don't know if dementia. So I wanted to study that. So that would be probably in my future plans because I'm into education and I like that. So that would be into, I want to further understand how music affects the brain, like from a scientific perspective, not just, okay, that's that. There's this one side of music, and there's the other side of music as well, which is the influence of music on newborn. So you see, there's the end and the beginning, if you want. So I want to try to understand and grasp what does music do before even questioning the influence on the culture itself, as from an anthropology kind of perspective. So I'm interested more into the scientific or the actual effect on the brain, and try to evolve that into something of like, if I can take it further. Now, as a mirror of our culture, music is a mirror of our culture. Yes, definitely. It's like any other art. Recently, I guess it was last year, when we shared that story of the artist who sold nothing for I don't know how much.
And I'm using it in all my workshops now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the mirror of our culture right now.
Just for our audience to know, Eddie shared with me, actually your wife shared with me, his name is Salvatore Garo or something like that, and he sculpted nothing, and and he sold it, right? And he called his invisible, quote unquote, sculpture I Am. And this hit me in the bone, and I started using it in my workshops.
It's very true, right? It's very true what he is.
Yeah, he is, exactly.
Nothing.
So yeah, that's I mean, I'm not saying that our culture is nothing like that sculpture, but yeah, there's a big chunk of art that is trying to destroy the human existence of our culture. So for me, yeah, there is music that is empty, that doesn't resonate. And even though they have like followers or fans or whatever you want, it means nothing. It's like just like the sculpture. And you have to understand that when you listen to music, don't listen like, it's like whatever you're eating, you won't eat garbage, right? So try to find music that resonates with you, that resonates with your values, with what you like in your life. Try to find music that elevates you, that makes you feel like, sometimes just a melody from, go check Korn Gold. I mean, listen to his melodies and you'll feel like you can own the world. You can just be on top of the world and be a Superman if you wanted to, or a Superwoman. So just listen to this kind of music and look for those elevation when you listen to. It's nice to have like, again, I have nothing against Britney Spears or any other artist by any means. It's nice to have the Motown from time to time if you like to. I love blues. That's something I really like. But I mean, yeah, it's nagging all the time. And it's like, no, it's not my life, but I like the music. So there's no, I listen to, well, lately to lo-fi chill music and chill pop and like those kind of new trends, just because I'm curious to know what's happening. I have nothing against any style of music or any genre, like literally. Even sometimes, even if I find EDM or electronic music a bit too much repetitive with no interest whatsoever, but that's the goal. They want to put you in a trance. So it's all about listening, understanding, and with no, how do you call it? Préjugé, with no prejudgment. Listen to any kind of music and try to form your own judgment.
I love that. That's a beautiful message, Eddie. Thank you for that. And I want to thank you also for, or actually celebrate your mission, even if it's your future mission of understanding the brain of children or of the elderly. That's a beautiful mission. And, whenever you start your journey on it, we would love to help you in any way.
Definitely.
So, thank you so much for your time. We really enjoyed the conversation and we hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Ideas on Trial. We're going to put the links of Edmond website in our show note. You can also check his social media, Edmond Redd, Twitter, Instagram, and I guess everywhere. Thank you for listening to Ideas on Trial.